crush your enemies.
They drew first blood, not me.
See them driven before you.
Oh, my user.
And hear the lamentation of your women.
But I pity the fool.
Glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate.
Phone home.
They're here.
Oh, real light sleeper, child.
Welcome to Vintage Video, where we're rewatching the 80s so you don't have to. We'll be reviewing every major film release of the 1980s in chronological order, overanalyzing what you've seen and spoiling what you haven't. I'm Patrick O'Reilly.
I'm Jesse Bayless.
And I'm Richard Wells.
And today we're discussing Mephisto, released March 22nd, 1982. It was written by Péter Dobai and István Szabó, based on the novel by Klaus Mann, directed by István Szabó, and released by Analysis Film Releasing Corporation. Constance Wu was born today. Happy birthday, Constance Wu. George Sibelius Faustus, the famed German alchemist, astrologer, magician, and con man, was born in the 1400s. Upon his death in the mid-1500s, he became the subject of the famous German legend of Faust.
I didn't know that the Faust legend was based on a real person.
Yeah, he actually traded his soul to the devil.
Oh, okay.
An accomplished but unfulfilled man who makes a deal with Mephistopheles, an agent of the devil, to unlock limitless powers to achieve his every dream in life in exchange for his immortal soul. Early versions of the story end with Faust being dragged off to hell, but most revisions end with God intervening on Faust's behalf. I've only ever heard it the other way, I feel like.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember God being part of any of the Faustian legends I've heard.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Is that, you made
She's
the
like,
bad deal.
No, it turns out it's great. Just take out a bunch of debt and things will just work out magically at the end.
You get a bailout.
Yeah.
That's when they changed it.
It was written by a one percenter. 300 some years after Faustus's death, Gustav Gründgens was born in Germany. He made his start as the director of a small Hamburg theater company in the early 20s. In 1925, he wrote to playwright Klaus Mann, seeking permission to put on a production of his play Anya and Esther. Gründgens was not only granted permission to perform, but he and Mann appeared among the cast, and the title roles of Anya and Esther were played by Mann's sister and fiancée respectively. It was during this production that Gründgens and Klaus Mann entered into a romantic relationship, though he would later marry Klaus's sister Erika.
I feel like that would be like one of those marriages where they're like, okay, you marry my sister, we'll all live together.
Yeah.
And,
Nobody'll know.
Nobody has to go near anybody of the opposite gender.
Exactly. In 1928, Gründgens transitioned to a theater in Berlin, and in the early 30s started working in film, with an acclaimed role as the chief judge of the Kangaroo Court prosecuting Peter Lorre's serial child murderer in Fritz Lang's M. But his best reviewed performance during his Berlin years was that of Mephisto, in an adaptation of the famous Faust legend. He was in Spain for a tour when the Nazis came to power and Hitler was elected chancellor, and Mann pleaded with him not to return to Berlin. But in pursuit of fame and fortune, he returned to Germany, where he was rewarded by Hitler's second-in-command, Hermann Göring, with a leadership position in the Prussian State Theater. After the war, Gründgens remained active in theater and even reprised the Mephisto role for the 1960 West German film Faust, directed by Gründgens' own son, Peter Gorski. While Gründgens was still working hand-in-hand with Göring during the lead-up to World War II, Klaus Mann wrote his 1936 novel Mephisto, painting Gründgens' cooperation with the Nazi Party as the same classic Faustian bargain that Gründgens spent each night reenacting for the State Theater. Hungarian filmmaker István Szabó acquired the film rights to the story, and after a successful theatrical run in Hungary, it was selected as Hungary's submission to the Academy Awards Best Foreign Language Film category, and became the first Hungarian film to win in the category, spurring a theatrical run in the U.S., which brought in close to $4 million, the highest-grossing Hungarian film at the time.
Wait, so does every country just submit one?
Yes. Each country can only submit one to the foreign language film each year.
I didn't know that.
What I thought was particularly interesting is that this is a very German story.
Right.
Which is being told by a Hungarian artist. What we watched was the result of a 4K restoration in 2017, which actually went back to the original image negatives. So this is like pristine scan. It looked really good.
It looked great, yeah.
We open picture on a production of Karl Malacker's Gräfin Dubarry, a German operetta about Madame Dubarry.
We actually open up with something else.
What do we open with?
We open up with a production logo of a rooster crapping out the name of the production company.
Yeah, very highbrow logo.
I was like, what the heck are we getting into?
Yeah, and then the rest of it's very straightforward period drama. We open picture on a production of Karl Malacker's Gräfin Dubarry, a German operetta about Madame Dubarry, the last royal mistress of France's King Louis XV, lifted from relative poverty to the highest social circles of Europe, and ultimately beheaded by guillotine in the French Revolution. The first song we see performed ends with Dubarry surrounded by suitors in a palace, and the audience explodes into applause. Backstage, Hendrik Höfgen is having a little freakout in a room by himself, desperately struggling to muffle the unbearable applause by wrapping his head haphazardly in fabric and tossing things around the room. Someone peeks in to check on him, and Hendrik shouts the man away. The show's prima donna, Dora Martin, pops into what looks like an after-party for the show and announces she can't stay because she's headed to another boring party elsewhere. Hendrik sneaks in around her to compliment her performance, but she knows he wasn't watching. Still, she praises his work and suggests he will likely go on to bigger, better things. Hendrik asks another member of the crew for cash to buy drinks and ignores a generous offer of cash from another young woman in their group. Hours later, Hendrik and the girl, Angelica, are the last two drinking in the harsh morning light of the bar. She asks what's eating him, and he complains he's a low-level actor and struggling to make any headway. We see him running through the city streets to the apartment of his girlfriend, Juliette. When he gets there, she threatens to come out looking for him the next time he's gone all night, but presumes that would cause trouble for him, since she's a black woman in early 1930s Germany. He tells her he doesn't drink, and she believes him to the point of not even being able to picture him ordering a beer. One wall of their apartment is mirrored with a ballet bar, and they jump right into dance practice together. Despite counting off a beat, the moves look fairly improvised. Juliette wanders back to bed and orders Hendrik to go faster and faster until he's just flailing around on the floor, and eventually Hendrik is too excited by the gyrations. He crosses the room to jump on her, and they're quickly stripping each other. She talks about how his face scares her like a mask would, and he says as an actor, he's always wearing one. He pile drives her off the bed and then drags her back to the mirror, where he shoves her face into his crotch before grabbing a silk scarf to drape over them both.
Yeah, it's a very aggressive foreplay.
Yeah, but she seems into it. We cut to a stage at night and the first table read of a new play. Nicoletta is here in the otherwise empty audience and has already been cast as the lead actress. But that's basically all we get of the scene, and we cut away to a bar where some of them have headed after the reading. Nicoletta introduces her friend Barbara Bruckner, who will help with set design. Hendrik orders a beer for his writing partner and a mineral water for himself, and at a table later explains his grand plans for transforming the local theater scene. He complains that all the plays are the same right now, and he wants to do something revolutionary that could interest the common people and not just the opera-going public. But basically, his writing partner here is playing the part of Klaus Mann, the author of the Mephisto novel. He is Grungens.
Okay.
And so the two of them are actually in a relationship, but here they're just played off as writing partners.
Right.
Barbara Bruckner is intended to be the sister of his writing partner, and so he's interested in the sister of the writing partner.
Yeah.
And goes on to marry her.
Right. But they clearly paired the two women together.
Right.
In this, rather than the two men.
Yeah. Nicoletta wonders where they would perform something like that if the audience aren't typically interested in theater, and Hendrik explains they would perform it right wherever the people are. Bring it to them. Docks, factories, cellars. Barbara asks Hendrik why he keeps staring at her, and he asks if it's forbidden. She seems to appreciate the flirtation. We hard cut to a packed theater just as the cast are doing their final bows before a curtain, and a roaring applause fills the stage. In a box seat, Barbara smiles down at Hendrik, clearly impressed by the show and the reaction of the crowd. The cast drag director Oscar Krogh into the spotlight to receive the praise, but he looks uncomfortable with it. We cut to Hendrik and Barbara on a nature walk together, and he's walking backwards in front of her. He tells her he has evil in him, but she can help quell it, and then he professes his love for her. She stops dead in her tracks, and he kneels before her and wraps his arms around her waist. We cut right to him telling Juliette about the new girl he loves, and she basically says, go for it, just don't talk to me about her and it's fine, even claiming she's never found him attractive anyway, but they don't have to end things between them.
So I started noticing it here, but it's throughout the whole movie. It's very oddly edited. Like, scenes don't...
In a very interesting way, though.
Yeah, scenes don't start and scenes don't end.
Yeah.
It's just, we're always right in the middle of something, cut, back into the middle of something else.
I feel like that might be a result of this having been a much longer film at some point, and them going, let's only show what we need to show. And even then, it's 2.5 hours long.
Right.
Suddenly, he pulls out a gun and points it to his own head, and she's worried for a moment until he points the gun at her, and she seems relieved, seemingly certain he would never shoot her. She advises him to see a therapist.
I don't quite understand this, because I feel like I don't really understand his motivation here.
He's just trying to get a reaction out of her. I think he's offended that she's not more upset about the new girl.
Oh, okay.
We cut to Barbara's family home as she introduces her fiancé Hendrik to her snobby grandmother, but she approves of the choice. They also notice a smiling Dolph Lundgren-esque dude in the corner, and Barbara introduces her brother Sebastian, who I don't believe says a word in the entire film. Soon, Barbara's mother has joined the group, and then, bizarrely, Nicoletta arrives, claiming to be the bride's best friend and practically a sister, and yet for some reason has to introduce herself to Barbara's entire immediate family, who seem never to have heard of her. But this is because they're sort of played as lovers here.
Yeah, it's like it's such a funny thing. It's just like she walks over and is like caressing her, and they start to kiss, and it's like no, we're just friends. You gotta remember we're just friends. It's like you're doing too much.
Yeah, they were roommates. She asks permission to refer to Barbara's mother Bella as an aunt, and when she approves, Nicoletta leans down to kiss her hand and then smiles back up at her uncomfortably. Barbara's grandfather tries to drag Hendrik away for a tour of his garden, and when he looks back to his fiancée, he sees Barbara and Nicoletta staring nose to nose into each other's eyes. We cut to a fancy backyard dinner, and Hendrik is suddenly choking spastically on his meal, like an angry podcaster. Nobody besides Barbara reacts at all to what looks like a severe medical emergency.
Right?
He's like, because I've been there.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm there right now.
And it's just like the father like is almost offended.
Yeah.
How dare
He's
you?
like, I'm not even going to acknowledge that this is happening. He can die at the table as far as I care.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the purpose of this scene? Is it that nobody cares about him?
I don't think it's that nobody cares. It's that they're willing to overlook any behavior on his part. That they're not going to acknowledge it. It's his wife's problem and his wife's problem alone. I think they're already married at this point. This is like a reception dinner.
Okay. Well,
it's just like, take care of your husband. We don't care who you marry. That's the point.
Just because they're just happy that she married a man, or like what?
I guess he's clearly below their
social
level.
Status?
Yeah. She leads him to a nearby bathroom where he leans under a faucet to dislodge whatever he was choking on, while her brother Sebastian watches, still smiling silently.
Yeah. I know it's later, but then they have like a portrait of him in the room.
I wondered if they weren't implying some sort of like mentally handicapped situation for this character. I don't know. We cut to Hendrik and Barbara lying across a bed together. He asks if she has any embarrassing memories and shares one of a time he sang poorly in choir at church. When she can't think of a story to share, he assumes she's never felt shame in her life and that he has basically always felt it. We cut to the stage of a dark theater where Barbara explains the set design for their upcoming play to the entire crew, and halfway through her explanation, Hendrik shouts over her and leads people around the stage as he improvises a few details, like how elements of the set design will stretch out into the audience to make them feel part of the scene. I like the idea.
Yeah, like he's talking about having like a
light post the whole way down the aisle.
Yeah, so you feel like you're on the street.
Yeah. We see a bit of rehearsal and the acting is wooden. Hendrik finally stands to interrupt when a woman forgets her line. He suspects out loud they've been paid to sabotage his work. He says a revolutionary theater experience needs professional actors, not the amateurs he's struggling with. We cut back to the bar from earlier, and a man who looks like he could be the love child of Aaron Eckhart and Kids in the Hall's Scott Thompson enters. He sits next to Barbara at the bar and orders 2 stiff drinks, and she invites him to her home tonight. He's surprised at her forwardness and asks to confirm if she's even talking to him. The next morning, Hendrik drops hints that he's having trouble affording their lifestyle. She rides horses every morning, and they owe the grocer a significant debt. He's annoyed she spends all night sitting with a man named Miklas, who he considers a Nazi thug. She feels bad for the man because he can't find much work. Hendrik claims that her liberalism and open-mindedness can be a weakness when she welcomes all philosophy into her brain. He thinks in time she might even excuse fascist terrorism or dictatorship. She's had all the lectures she can stomach and stands to leave. At the bar later, Hendrik announces the cast of their upcoming production and makes a point to insult a rejected actress named Lotte Lindenthal by calling her a stupid cow. Miklas is offended on her behalf and calls him out for insulting her because of her affiliation with the National Socialist Party. Hendrik says he doesn't judge people for who they sleep with, and he can't keep track of her lovers anyway, and Miklas is upset again. He tries to attack Hendrik, and someone stops him halfway across the room. Miklas announces that Jewish people are ruining the theater business, and he won't stand for it. Hendrik stands to console the angry man by promising he won't be shackled to this quote-unquote Jew-ridden business much longer. In the next scene, the director tries to talk Hendrik out of firing Miklas because he's a sick man and he knows not what he says. Hendrik says Miklas leaves or he does, and they have to approve the man's firing. We cut back to the stage for a kicky can-can number, and Hendrik dances among the women, pushing them harder and pushing their kicks higher than they seem capable of. Hendrik even calls the spotlight for himself and dances facing the audience for a while until he's dragged off stage to approve the show's poster. He's already annoyed at being interrupted when he sees his name Hendrik is misspelled Henrik and crumples the poster in his hands. He meets privately with the director to discuss an offer from another theater group in Berlin. He doesn't think he can grow much more here, and the director offers his blessing. His partner at the new position will be Dora Martin, the prima donna who sang the opening operetta piece. Now, in Berlin, we see Hendrik slip into an office halfway through a duet rehearsal between two women. At the end of their song, they're excused by a professor who then welcomes Hendrik to the university. He says Hendrik came highly recommended through family connections and Dora Martin herself. Hendrik assures the man that though he may seem boring in person, he has some enticing ideas to share. The professor says he won't make as much money here, but the cost of living is lower. Hendrik claims not to be money-minded and is pointed to the desk of Miss Bernhardt to get settled. The professor's secretary, Miss Bernhardt, presents him with his contract, which he signs without reading. He'll make 700 marks a week and is expected to act among the cast, which was probably his preference anyway. He sends a greeting card to Dora Martin with just the word Danke, thank you, written across the back. Starting over in Berlin after his work in Hamburg doesn't seem to frighten him at all. It's a bigger pond, so he knows there's more room to grow here.
But he understands. He understands. It's like, I was a big fish in a little pond, and now I have to...
We cut right to him on a much larger stage doing a Hopak dance, sometimes called a Cossack dance, or that Russian squatting dance, but it's technically Ukrainian in origin, for the enormous crowd. When he finishes his final dance number, the audience stands to applaud. At an after-party, people refer to him as Dora Martin's lover. As he circulates, he speaks to people in English as well as German, as his stardom grows internationally.
So one of the foreign press speaks English to him.
Yes.
And he says, "We shall watch your career with great interest." And I was like, did George Lucas lift that line
He might
for
have,
Phantom Menace?
That's funny. We cut back to the smaller Hamburg theater, lit in dim red light with dinner tables in the audience. Hendrik sings alone before a curtain. He gets another round of applause finishing the song, and when he steps out of the theater that night, he sees soldiers beating up men on the street for being Jewish. He's introduced on yet another stage as a state theater actor, but he reintroduces himself as a comrade of the people because this is another working-class venue, and he's embarrassed to be labeled as a state-approved artist. He sings songs about the proletariat and freedom and equality for all without slavery or government leadership. At home, he sees Barbara return from shopping, and she mentions a painting she bought. She tells him to check it out while she changes clothes, but then brings it with her while she changes, I guess enticing him to follow her. When he does, he doesn't seem interested in the painting, but after they make love, she unwraps it to reveal a pencil drawing of her own brother Sebastian.
He's always with us now.
Great. Thanks so much.
He's also over there.
He's just standing next to the painting. Hendrik says goodbye to the painting and announces he must leave for work. We see a quick montage of him in various costumes, playing various roles on stage. We get an idea of his range and physical capability. Later, we see him crawling through mud on a film set, playing a World War I soldier.
This movie moves very quickly.
Yeah.
Because I can only assume by now, 3 years have passed.
Right. It's actually been more like 5, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say it moves quickly because it does and it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are probably more than an hour into this film at this point, maybe an hour and a half into the film, and we still haven't really gotten to his own Faustian bargain.
Right.
So, which is where I think the film gets the most interesting is that turn. And obviously we have to build up to it, but we've been building for a while here.
We have been, but I think part of it is important to show his transition from the proletariat side to the state-approved side.
Yeah.
And also, I think a lot of this, the point is to lay the groundwork of this is a historical story about a real person, even though we didn't have the life rights to that person.
Yeah.
So I think him on this movie set, for example, is the equivalent of the actor in real life working in Fritz Lang's M, because they're saying he's famous now. Like he's actually being captured on film in a way that you could go watch him right now. I'm actually interested in rewatching M just to see who the character is that this guy plays. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the country, Miklas, who has been rejected from the theater community, is now coaching a large troupe of Hitler Youth. We cut from that to Hendrik in his best-known makeup from the film, a painted white face with a tight hood over his hair, and wild, pencil-thin eyebrows. It's the demon character Mephistopheles from the Faust legend, nicknamed Mephisto, from which the film takes its title. We see him offering a man the classic Faustian bargain, the man's wildest dreams in exchange for his soul. Again, the crowd are completely entranced by his performance, and he receives another standing ovation. Backstage, Dora congratulates the performance in his dressing room. She informs him she's learning English to go and work in America. She can see theaters closing here, and the industry is dying in Germany, while America is picking up the slack. He reminds her she's the biggest celebrity in all of Germany, with thousands of adoring fans, and she would rather leave on top than let them grow bored of her. He's less convinced that any political upheaval could ever strip Germany of its theatrical tradition. He leaves from the theater to meet with his first girlfriend, Juliette, in her new apartment. Hendrik is paying for this place himself and asks if the landlord had any issue with a black woman living here, but she says he is perpetually drunk and it was no problem. Juliette mentions the public's fear of change in Germany and asks Hendrik, as the unofficial spokesperson for German culture, what the Jews might be planning. He asks her to go to bed with him, and we cut to the next morning when Hendrik is rudely awoken by the early return of his wife Barbara. She informs him that in the hours he spent sleeping in, news has broken that the Nazis have won many elections and there is a new chancellor. When he doesn't seem to care, she turns on the radio and points to today's paper. Though they never name him specifically in the film, it's clear from context that Hitler has been appointed chancellor in the wake of these Nazi electoral victories. He mocks her underestimating of the Nazi threat in the past, but she says the consequences of this change will hit them hard soon and there is work to do. Hendrik assures her half-heartedly that there's nothing to worry about. But not buying into his own condolences, he reminds her that he's just an actor and has no part to play in the politics of their country.
Yeah, he also says there was an election and he won, so
Right.
when there's another election, maybe he'll lose.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, it's not how.
It's not the way it works in these situations. She tells him that many of their friends are leaving. He thinks it's an overreaction and that power changes back and forth in a democracy like theirs. The phone rings and he begs her not to answer it, but if she must, to say he's sick. Clearly he's been hiding from people since he missed all her calls this morning. She tells him that as a mouthpiece for the workers and a celebrity in his field, he's obligated to take a stand against the new government or to make a statement by leaving. She worries their freedoms will soon be taken away, and he counters that the only freedom he cares about is the freedom to act here in Germany. He says he's a German actor and he'll stay a German actor until he dies. She's free to leave with her father if she so chooses. Otto, Hendrik's old writing partner from the Hamburg theater group, stops by to demand he reunite with them and make a statement against this. Hendrik hems and haws, he minimizes the threat, and exaggerates the importance of the work he's doing before ultimately turning Otto down. In the middle of the night, Hendrik gets a note slipped under his door. It's a contract for a film shooting in Budapest, and he's playing the lead. We cut right to him in costume, ready to play the part. The same professor who invited him to Berlin is directing the film. On set one day, the director is presented with a newspaper announcing that back home, the communists have burned down the Reichstag, which is basically the German equivalent of the American Capitol building. Hendrik speaks again with Miss Bernhardt, who informs him that his wife has left to Paris with her father, and she would like him to follow her there. Confusingly, we jump cut to a second consecutive shot of Miss Bernhardt in a darker room now, informing Hendrik that his writing partner Otto has been arrested by the new government. She presumes they can never return to Berlin, since the Nazis have published blacklists forbidding certain people, including his wife Barbara and Hendrik himself. Then, we cut to a third shot of Miss Bernhardt, and even though we're cutting closer and closer, we can see now that she's undressed. Hendrik must be forming a relationship with her here in Budapest, where their production is stranded. I love this sequence of shots because the first time it happens, you're like, that was an odd choice. Mm-hmm. And then the second time it happens, you're like, it was a choice. Yeah. It was on purpose. Yeah. And in 3 simple shots, we've shown her telling him something as a coworker. Suddenly, it's a little bit more personal because it's dark out. They're somewhere at night together. And then in the next shot, she's not wearing clothing. But we only ever see her. We never see his reaction. And the whole relationship is implied by that. I just thought that's such a brilliant way to do the scene. She begs him not to return to Berlin because she wants to keep him here with her. We jump now to the film's crew sharing a fancy dinner on a patio, and Dora Martin is asked to dance by another member of the cast. Meanwhile, Hendrik talks to the director/professor about a contract he has in Vienna. The director confesses he will not return to Germany. And then further, that he predicted these actions from the instability of the German government and brought Hendrik along for the film as a means of escaping the consequences at home.
So this is probably supposed to be Fritz Lang.
Right. And this is probably the same situation where he was on tour in Spain on purpose to avoid whatever was going to happen in the wake of these elections.
It's such a great setup. I mean, like, I realize that it's based on this real life situation,
But it works so well.
It's such a good setup to just be
And the Mephisto part of it is just insane how well that correlates to the story.
Like everybody is telling you to do this, to be safe and to leave and not go back, and then
But there's this thing that's tempting you.
Yeah, there's this draw to go back. It's just it's so well set up.
But I especially think it's so fascinating that he was on such the opposite end of the spectrum at the start. He was literally like, people thought he was being an asshole to Nazis and Nazi sympathizers. And he spends the entire 2.5 hours of the film traversing the spectrum from proletariat to like extreme Nazi sympathizer.
Yeah.
Or full Nazi, maybe.
It's hard. Like, I feel like we don't really resolve that at the end either. Like, we don't, like, obviously he's playing along and playing his part through the rest of this film, but we don't really get a reveal of how he's feeling. It's more about everybody else's reactions to him.
Yeah. Well, part of that, I think, is because the book came out in 1936. So he hadn't completed the arc yet by the time the novel was released. Also, his son, the one who directed him in the 1960 Mephisto film, sued the author when the book came out, saying that it was not fair the way he portrayed his father. But people were like, no, this is pretty accurate to what your dad did. So sorry, it doesn't work. Later, we see Hendrik receiving a letter from his friend Angelica back home. She's in Berlin now and informs him that despite his name being blacklisted, her friend Lotte Lindenhurst has assured them that as a celebrity, she can get him whitelisted to return and carry on the grand tradition of German theater in Berlin. And
this is such an interesting shot too, because we're on like a close up of like this mouth, like it's just a faceless person here, and so it feels like it would feel in a letter where it's sort of like, I don't know, I can't see your face.
Yeah, like,
I don't know.
I know what the person looks like.
I don't
so
know
I'll
if I should
her.
believe you. Should I'm like, I can't tell what the tone and the intonation is like, because it's just this mouth reading this letter, and you're like, this feels like
this
a
could
trap.
Be a trap.
It feels like a trap.
Yeah.
I was told I was blacklisted. It feels like a trap.
Yeah, it's like, everything is safe. Come on back.
Yeah. The water's fine. The Nazi Party thinks it's important that talented artists be presented to the public in the name of preservation of their culture. This is a very blatant hypocrisy trap, because earlier we saw him call Lotte a stupid cow for her affiliations with the Nazi Party, and here he's being given a chance to reject her favor in the name of his so-called beliefs, or accept the invitation and return to Berlin by will of the fascist regime. We can see on his face that Hendrik is nothing but relieved by the letter, and boards a train the next day to Berlin.
That's what he wanted anyways.
Yeah. But I love that for this moment, it's not even a question for him. He's like, oh, great. That's awesome. That's so convenient for me.
Yeah, that's also his ego, though.
Yeah.
Of us, like, it's like, of course they want me back.
Yeah. Why wouldn't they? The train station is crowded with Nazi soldiers bearing swastika armbands. Hendrik is interrogated by one such man as a soldier peruses his passport. He introduces himself as an actor in the State Theater in Berlin. He's apparently approved, and we cut to him at the theater with Kaiser, the man who replaced the professor. He warns that Hendrik might not recognize the atmosphere here, since things have drastically changed. Hendrik will not be granted permission to appear in the plays of his friends in Hamburg. He's here at the State Theater exclusively. And they're no longer allowed to produce French farces. Strictly nationalistic German art is acceptable. The man even admits that he advised against Hendrik's invitation, but Lotte Lindenthal insisted on working with him directly for her comedic debut. The man assumes Hendrik will be more than pleased to portray Lotte's love interest on stage, since she is, to his eyes, a beautiful woman. And we're supposed to think that it'll be difficult for Hendrik to put aside his politics, even though he's here by her doing and pursuing celebrity over his own personal beliefs. So I never for a second thought that he would have trouble with this.
Yeah.
We see them rehearsing a moment, and then outside half flirting with each other. It seems Hendrik is in the market for a third mistress. Sometime later, Hendrik is visited by his friend Bach from the Hamburg Theater Group. He shares that he's no longer welcome in their local bar and was thrown out of his home by his landlord for his political affiliations. When he heard Hendrik was back in Berlin, he thought he might ask his friend for a place to stay. Hendrik is clearly not excited about the plan, but welcomes Bach to stay here in secret for some time. He also asks that Bach leave randomly and without fanfare when he has somewhere to go. He even suggests suicide as a decent option for the man. Sometime later, he's back with Juliette and promises to buy her a radio to stay aware of the world outside in which she can no longer safely exist. She's annoyed at being cooped up, and he reminds her the trouble they will be in if she's caught here. She's finally disgusted by his resignation with the way of their world. Now, we cut to Hendrik finding the cast list for an upcoming production of Faust, and when we see it up close, his name is not there. This time, without being passively offered the favor, he goes directly to Lotte to beg for the role of Mephisto in the new Faust production. She promises to see what she can do, and very quickly he's granted the role again by the new Professor Kaiser. We cut to an extreme close-up of Hendrik signing another thank you card to mail to Lotte Lindenthal this time. We see Hendrik enter a room full of younger actors, and among them he finds Miklas. The man is embarrassed to need lessons from Hendrik, but he begs to be accepted as a student because he cares that much about the arts. They perform some rhyming dialogue back and forth until Hendrik turns and looks into camera to ask if this is where the cut happens, and we cut. This is as meta as it gets, because the scenes are presented to us as though this is a natural conversation between these two characters we've come to know, a guy asking a favor and another person granting the favor, but it's actually Miklas playing the part of the artist roped into the Faustian bargain by Hendrik's Mephisto character.
Yeah.
We see them together acting out more of the Mephisto temptation scene. We jump to the night of the show, and we have a packed house. The German Prime Minister and his female acquaintance are seated in the central box seats and get nods of approval and loyalty from all the other rich people in the audience. He is referred to interchangeably as the Prime Minister or simply General, and though he's never specifically named in the story, the character is a stand-in for Hermann Göring, one of the most powerful figures in the Nazi Party. On stage, though, Miklas is not playing the man dealing with Mephisto. After the show, Hendrik is summoned to the box seats of the Prime Minister as a meet and greet with the Mephistopheles actor. Without even thinking, Hendrik bows to show the man respect, but pauses as he stands back up to recall the youth he spent rallying against these people. The man puts forward a hand for Hendrik to shake and speaks flatteringly of his performance. He comments on Hendrik's soft grip and suggests the secret of acting is to appear strong when one is weak. He can tell Hendrik has prepared for this role for some time, and Hendrik says he's prepared his entire life. The Prime Minister approves of this dedication and suggests all professionals should strive toward their dreams from birth. The true secret of greatness.
I just really enjoy this scene because he's prepared his whole life for this, as in his life is reflecting this role in the choices that he's making right here with the general.
And watching this the first time, I keep thinking, like, is this going to be an Inglourious Bastards moment, or are we just going to play through and he's going to cooperate with these people? The Prime Minister stands to shake his hand again, and the entire theater watches in silence, possibly in fear of this known former anti-fascist doing something terrible. Or great. But he doesn't. Their conversation ends with a third handshake, and Hendrik backs away gracefully. Back in Hendrik's home, the phone rings, and Bach answers, posing as an assistant. It's Lotte Lindenthal, and Hendrik is eager to speak with her. She's calling to invite him to a small dinner after tonight's show, and he quickly agrees. He's ecstatic to be one of a small group tonight because the other guests are undoubtedly on his level of celebrity or higher. Here, for the first time, he questions out loud whether he's a terrible person for accepting the invitation, and Bach tells him he's not a monster, he's just successful, which is probably the same thing Hendrik has been telling himself. The small dinner ends up being literally just Hendrik, Lotte, and a handful of German officials, including the Prime Minister again. The Prime Minister was very taken by Hendrik at the theater and seems worried about German artistic traditions being smuggled abroad. He wants someone in charge of preserving their state art and seems to consider Hendrik a candidate. He's also an insufferable close talker, and Hendrik keeps leaning away as the man leans in. He drags Hendrik around his home to point out all the classical German Romanticism paintings that he's bought back from foreign art dealers. He tells Hendrik there's a little of the Mephisto character in all Germans, and that he identifies with the trickster demon trope. He considers Mephisto a German national hero, but won't say that out loud.
Well, that's such a weird thing to say.
I mean, it's the whole "are we the baddies" conversation over and over again with these people. You know, they're like, don't tell anyone, but I identify with the villain of every story ever. Hannibal Lecter was a cool guy. He invites Hendrik to meet with him in a couple days for a press conference on the importance of German art. Back in his own apartment, we see Hendrik practicing his handshake on a coat rack after the Prime Minister criticized its softness. On his way out later, he shakes Bach's hand and seems to injure the man.
He's built up that strength.
Ow! Hendrik arrives at the press conference and seems a bit disoriented. The room is surrounded in columns and enormous hanging swastika banners. Before he's even given a chance to speak, Hendrik is met by the famous artists of other mediums. One seems disturbed with the crowd of foreign press invited to this event, until Hendrik explains this is a conversation on the importance of German art to the world. A famous sculptor woman approaches, asking for the chance to do a bust of Hendrik's head. For now, she can't decide if it would be clay or bronze and asks what his face is made of, to which he replies, perhaps a mixture.
Ich frage mich, woraus ihr Gesicht ist. Vielleicht eine Mischung.
The press cameras notice the sculptress's fascination with Hendrik, and soon they focus their lights and lenses on this side conversation. She gives Hendrik her number to get in touch with her studio for a sculpture. Suddenly, the conversation is even being photographed, and we cut away to the Prime Minister on a couch at home. It seems late at night, and the man is undressed to a shirt and suspenders. He continues speaking glowingly of Hendrik's performance of the Mephisto character and how it seems to change from night to night. Hendrik admits that by thinking on his feet and not boxing himself into a repeat performance, that even the recurring audience won't know what to expect, which gives the show a different kind of energy.
I love that the PM is just so weirdly obsessed with him. It's like, I've been to every single one of your shows.
I've noticed all these slight differences in your performance every night. When Hendrik mentions the word culture specifically, the Prime Minister recoils, considering the theory of culture to be a Bolshevik word, and surprisingly, Hendrik admits to having fallen in with that crowd for a while, but claims to have left it behind. A daring admission, but the Prime Minister is not as upset as I expected, instead admitting that basically we all make mistakes. The Prime Minister stands to make them some drinks, and Hendrik shows a second hint of courage by explaining that other talented artists made the same mistake he did, and that he harbors guilt for avoiding the punishments they faced. Then, he makes his most daring request, pleading specifically for the release of his old writing partner, Otto Ulrich, promising the man must be reformed by now. When he asks for more information, Hendrik admits Otto ran the communist cabaret called the Stormbird, and the Prime Minister doesn't look excited to track this man down and offer a pardon. Hendrik assures him Otto is a good man, and if he swears off Bolshevism, he's a man of his word. We cut now to a room where Hendrik and Otto are reunited. Apparently, Hendrik was successful in arranging his friend's release. I almost expected this to be like in Victory, when the people show up and they're all starved practically to death. We cut now to the studio of the sculptor, and the Prime Minister is here to offer his thoughts on her latest work, a 12-foot-tall sculpture of a nude man. He considers it proof of Germany's artistic excellence. The Prime Minister signs some paperwork, apparently offering the government's official approval, and for whatever reason, Hendrik is invited to co-sign. Halfway through his signature, we see a flash of white, like a single white frame with a sting of audio. I feel like this is supposed to be him officially signing his soul away. On the way out, the Prime Minister sees a clay bust of Hendrik and calls out the sly dog for visiting the studio in secret. Next, we see Hendrik speaking at another gala, wallpapered with swastikas, about the brilliance of the sculpture, which, in the wide shot, doesn't actually look very good. The proportions are weird, and it looks a bit like a styrofoam sculpture instead of a marble one, which it probably is.
Hey, it's much harder to carve styrofoam.
And maybe David looks weird from up there, too. I don't know. Hendrik's old friend Nicoletta shows up to the exhibition and tries to speak with him, but he's reluctant to speak with her because of her Hamburg affiliations. She tells him what's happened to the members of their group within earshot of the sculptress, who seems to take note of the woman's implied political leanings. We cut to Hendrik visiting Juliette, cooped up in her apartment, and she asks why he insists on these speaking engagements to promote German nationalism, and by association, the Nazi Party, and he claims not to have a choice in the matter. Juliette sees through the excuse and understands that he just enjoys the rewards of playing along. She reminds him that he won't be the party's perfect little boy if word of his black girlfriend gets out, and she fears she might die in the streets, despite being a second-generation German citizen, but he claims he's at risk too. She is understandably furious to hear him make this about himself when she's clearly in significantly more danger, and even admits that she dreamed one day of having a child with him. He puts an end to any baby talk, and she shows him a childhood photo of himself that she once stole and asks if he even recognizes himself anymore. One night in his dressing room, Hendrik is approached by Miklas with an envelope. He's angry about rumors Hendrik has spread around the theater, but that's not why he's visiting today. He and other members of the state theater troupe have signed a letter of protest because they're splitting from the Nazi Party because of what Germany has become. So now, not only did Hendrik switch sides to achieve his professional goals, but the man he criticized for being a Nazi earlier is seeing the error of his ways first.
But see, I thought for sure this was a trap.
That he was gonna turn him in for agreeing with them or signing the protest?
Or even the act of accepting the envelope would be an admission of consideration.
And he returns it immediately.
He doesn't take it.
Yeah.
He doesn't even touch it. And I was like, and Miklas kind of swings it back I almost got him. But Hendrik was so I was like, don't touch it. Don't. Yeah. It's like the race card from 30 Rock. Yeah. No, don't take it.
Hendrik refuses to read the protest letter and warns Miklas that he's playing with his own life and the lives of their coworkers by openly protesting. Hendrik sits back down in front of his mirror and stares at himself for a while. Then we cut to the Prime Minister's half of a phone conversation with Hendrik as he reports Miklas's actions. The Prime Minister thanks him for his loyalty and calls him a good little soldier. The next day, a group of soldiers drag Miklas out of the theater and load him into a car. He's driven to the middle of the woods and told to walk in a random direction, Miller's Crossing style. As he walks, a row of 5 soldiers cock their Lugers and shoot him in the back. He collapses to his knees and falls over in the dirt. A press release is put out announcing to the theater group that Miklas died in a car accident, which is something akin to the Russian government saying someone fell out a window.
Right.
Which I think happened again this morning as we're recording this.
He was driving his car and ran into some bullets.
Oh no. Shot himself twice in the back. Filthiest suicide I ever seen. As the theater troupe mourn the loss of their friend, Lotte admits she had a bad feeling about the man. That night, Joachim, another member of the acting troupe, walks into Hendrik's dressing room to accuse him of having turned Miklas in. Hendrik says it's preposterous to presume the government would fake a car accident to kill a no-name actor. It's clear Joachim doesn't believe Hendrik's defense. We cut to another private meeting with the Prime Minister, and he has an offer for Hendrik. He prefaces the conversation by promising that Hendrik can refuse and continue acting if he pleases. But if he accepts, he can do much more to support the Nazi Party's cause. He was moved by Hendrik's speech at the sculpture unveiling, and he wants Hendrik to write his own autobiography. The Prime Minister will see that Hendrik is put in the position of managing the Prussian State Theater. He also mentions leaving out any chapters involving Hamburg, or the revolutionary theater of his youth. Just talk about Mephisto and your work in the State Theater, that'll be great. The Prime Minister asks if Hendrik is aware of his wife's location. Last he heard she was in Paris with her father, but the Prime Minister explains she's in Amsterdam now, actively working against Germany for a political publication. Hendrik denies any communication with the woman, and the Prime Minister promises him a speedy divorce from the traitor to Germany. The Prime Minister has a very expansive file on Hendrik's entire life, and paging through it comes to a dossier on Juliette, the black girlfriend whose rent he pays. The Prime Minister points out that Hendrik obviously can't continue a relationship with a woman who defies the racial purity of the motherland. He is to cut ties at once and stop paying for her apartment, which will of course strand her in a hostile city, but the Prime Minister assures him no harm will come to her and she'll be escorted out of Germany for her own safety. For now, Hendrik is to focus on his plans for the theater and to draft the text of a press conference announcing his upcoming leadership.
I 100% did not believe that they were actually going to follow through with that promise.
Agree. It sounds shady even when he's saying it.
Yeah.
When he gets home that afternoon, Hendrik worries if they know about Bach since they knew about Juliette. He asks for his notebook so that he might contact some friends with an important message. The first he requests by name is Miss Nicoletta, who he seemed scared to speak with at the statue unveiling. Bach asks if Hendrik wants tea, and he responds directly into camera with a string of questions he's struggling with. Should he accept the manager position? Should he move to America to work on films like Dora Martin has? He's tempted to accept the manager position because the Prime Minister considers him the savior of German theater. But in a reverse angle we see, he's not asking Bach these questions. He's asking Nicoletta, who he has invited to his home between the shots we've seen. She smiles blankly, overloaded by the line of questioning, but promises to help him make a decision. And when she stands, he steps forward to hold her. And that's all it takes in this movie to imply a relationship has begun. Because that's exactly what he did with Barbara. He just said a bunch of stuff, asked a question, and then hugged her. And that means we're engaged now. We cut back to Juliette's apartment as 2 German agents enter and give her 5 minutes to pack her things. They provide her with a French passport and escort her to a waiting car. We cut back to the theater, where Hendrik has clearly taken the manager's position and complains to the company about the dusty dressing rooms in need of cleaning. He tells them if they're not prepared to work as hard as he does, they should find other employment. The actor Joachim meets with him during office hours to ask for better roles, and he thinks that as an actor himself, Hendrik will better understand the request. Amusingly, we cut inside Hendrik's head for the first and only time in the film to hear his internal monologue. I must act as though he's saying something important.
Ich muss jetzt so tun, als würde was Wichtiges sagen.
It turns out being a former actor actually makes him more dangerous to the other actors because he can better pretend to care about their needs. We get a mini montage of his management style, which includes teaching other staff members to manipulate the actors and occasionally spazzing out over minor prop and costume details.
I loved this montage.
Yeah, of him just like being so happy-go-lucky all the time with like visiting financiers.
And then just literally like tearing the costume off of an actor.
Yeah, just screaming at everybody who's below him in the theater company. We can tell he genuinely loves being the manager in charge of all these people, but laments that the government makes him use blonde, untalented actors. He's also disturbed that internationally, German stories are being protested and prevented from being performed on account of Germany's global unpopularity. Hendrik can't even come up with new German stories he's comfortable telling because the government's stranglehold on new art is preventing the best works from being composed. He contemplates going back to the old farces of the 1700s with rococo wigs and white faces. Otto suggests doing a new story that speaks to the people and a desire for freedom from dictatorship, but Hendrik refuses to even acknowledge the comment since it's clearly not an option in their current situation.
He's like, it's like, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
I didn't even hear that. And he implies that there are listening devices
Yeah.
in that room that they're in. Because he points to his throat and goes, gestures all around him. Like, what are you doing?
He knows he's the bad guy here and acknowledges it out loud again by asking them what a great villain he's playing and if he seems completely insane. In his office, we see Hendrik open a letter from the government demanding the dismissal of 2 staff members for racial impurity, which I think in this case means they're Jewish. He goes to speak with them for a moment, and then we see his secretary drafting a response about their importance to the theater and how he can't lose them. But we kind of drop that here. We don't see what happens in the wake of that. Him saying, no, I'm not going to fire them. Walking the halls of the theater one night, he finds political pamphlets littering the floor advising these citizens not to tolerate Nazi oppression. Terrified of being accused of distributing them himself, he runs around collecting every scrap of paper he can find to throw them away.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is a good idea and a bad idea.
Right.
Because you don't want to be caught with them all in your hand.
A handful of them. Like something out of a Looney Tunes short, he follows the pages like a trail of breadcrumbs through the theater, but sadly they don't lead him into a blatant trap. We see him burning the papers in his office and then wrapping the ashes in newspaper to throw away elsewhere. We see Hendrik take a discreet day trip to Paris, where he pays a visit to his girlfriend Juliette, who it turns out was actually safely relocated.
This was shocking to me because even at the point at which she was getting into the car with those goons, I was like, I don't know if she's gonna make it out of this one.
I was almost certain the next shot would be her walking into the woods in a random direction. She has to admit she is grateful to have been relocated since she would not have survived long in Germany without him.
Not that Paris was going to be all that much better.
Yeah, I was just...
They're going to be here pretty soon.
I was just going to say, enjoy it while you can.
Yeah. We see them naked in bed together, and he tells her he must go, possibly for keeps, and that she can't follow him to the station or write any more letters because it would only invite trouble. While in Paris, he also makes a stop at a local cafe to see Barbara, from whom I thought he was speedily divorced. She is disgusted with his loyalty to the government and can't understand how he could stomach living in Berlin under dictatorial rule.
I'm shocked that he's willing
to go see her.
To go see either of them.
Yeah,
even
because he doesn't care about her.
And he knows how much they're being watched and listened to
right?
when he's back home. Like, why would it be any different here?
Yeah, he just promised the prime minister that he's not in contact with this woman, and then he goes and speaks with her in Paris. Hendrik considers himself a preservationist of the arts as though he were protecting it from the government and not helping them destroy it. When he's heard enough of her complaints, he admits the core truth that he has truly switched sides and it's not an undercover revolutionary situation. He claims to hate coffee shop intellectuals and resistance fighters. He even argues there are good people among the Nazi ranks. A few tables away, we see the same British gentleman who spoke to him after the first Mephisto performance. She asks if he even cares about freedom or if all he needs is adulation, and he admits adulation is more than enough. The British man rises and crosses the room to slap Hendrik for his cooperation with the German government.
That's for what's happening in Germany.
That's the same guy that went to a Nazi-funded,
he went to
talk
Berlin.
About the arts.
Yeah.
He went to Berlin to see a Mephisto play, but it was before the Nazis had won the elections. And,
was it?
And Hitler was appointed chancellor.
It was before.
Yeah.
Oh, because in my brain it was... I thought that guy... Yeah, okay, you're probably right.
I mean, there were still Nazis in Germany. They just hadn't seized.
They weren't in power yet.
Okay.
But the man must speak German because he knows enough not to hold Barbara responsible and apologizes for his outburst before leaving. Hendrik pays the bill and leaves embarrassed. Walking through a park in Paris, he asks himself what he could possibly do here that he couldn't do at home. What's the use of freedom if you're already doing what you care about the most? We cut to a large backyard reception, and Hendrik arrives holding the hand of his new wife, Nicoletta. As Hendrik walks around to speak with his guests, they all kiss his ass and talk up their extreme patriotism, claiming to support the country of Germany regardless of who's in charge. Even the former theater manager Kaiser is here. He compliments a speech Hendrik gave in Paris about the state of Germany, and he says he answered honestly and made the country proud. A car pulls up, and everyone turns their attention to the arriving Prime Minister and his entourage, who come bearing wedding gifts aplenty. The Prime Minister snatches a beer from a passing platter and chugs it in one pull. He congratulates Hendrik on his marriage and upcoming Hamlet production, and agrees with Kaiser that Hendrik made a good impression with his Paris interview. The Prime Minister walks right into the villa hosting the event and raises a toast to the new couple. Unfortunately, after an awkward pause, he must leave already. The party guests, who have stood still and silent for his entire visit, wait patiently for the Prime Minister's car to pull away before returning to the festivities.
I like when he's chugging the beer, someone takes his photo, and he's kind of like that's not going to be a great photo of me. Well, especially if it gets published, because like Hitler did
not let people drink. Yeah, it's like no,
not
purity.
Not good for your PM to be.
Purity means just vegetables and meth. What are you doing, dirtying your body up with beer? Our #1 export. A troop of men in Mephisto makeup circle Hendrik with their arms interlocked and start dancing around him, keeping him trapped in the middle. The moment is filmed in a dizzying way from Hendrik's perspective, trying to focus on one face at a time as they spin. More and more guests join the circles, and soon everyone, including Hendrik, is standing hand in hand in a long string of people. The next morning, he asks Nicoletta if they deserve this, but then admits that he thinks they definitely do, and that no one else could save the theater the way they're doing it.
We're pretty great.
No, it's the children who are wrong. Sometime later, he's back at his desk in the theater when his secretary enters to inform him Otto is missing again. She was told that he was abducted by a pair of agents 2 days ago. Hendrik asks to be put in touch with the Prime Minister to see which government have collected Otto this time. He's invited to speak with the Prime Minister in person, but this time, the Prime Minister is less receptive to Hendrik's request. He tells Hendrik to forget about Otto and stop meddling in the government's affairs because it's beyond his jurisdiction. He tells Hendrik that if he puts up a fight, he'll be crushed like a bug because he's unimportant to the party's goals, which cuts to Hendrik's core. He could care less about Otto, probably, but to learn that the government doesn't actually consider him an irreplaceable golden boy is a mortal wound. Frozen in place, the Prime Minister has to shout at him, "Get out, actor!"
Raus, Schauspieler!
It's possible that the man has been tired of Hendrik's shit for a while, but we've also gotten a long string of tender moments between them.
Yeah.
And I wonder if he wasn't romantically interested in Hendrik, and this might be inspired by his recent marriage to someone else.
Yeah. Oh, and that was another thing I meant to bring up at the wedding reception.
Yeah.
Nicoletta's girlfriend is wearing a black veil.
Yeah.
Because like her best friend, her quote, air quotes, best friend just married another man.
Hendrik is led away out of the government building, but he's not done advocating for his friend Otto. He goes directly to Lotte and implores her to use her government connections to facilitate Otto's release, but when he tells her how worried he is, she wonders why. Worried? But he's dead.
Wieso Sorgen? Ist doch tot.
She claims it was a suicide, and Hendrik is dumbstruck. We cut to a close-up of Nicoletta in white face paint, hugging Hendrik tight. She claims Otto knew the risks of what he was doing, and perhaps they should envy his escape of sorts. It's weird that he thought Lotte could fix it, though. It's like, you literally talk, like, who am I going to talk to? Hitler? Specifically? Hendrik backs away to wipe a tear from his eye and then kisses his wife hard on the mouth, smearing his face with her makeup, which uncoincidentally resembles the Mephisto face. We see Hendrik backstage at the theater speaking with local reporters about his upcoming Hamlet production and how it will extol the virtues of Germany.
Okay, so those were reporters.
Yeah.
I didn't know because the subtitles for me cut out.
Oh, okay.
Like this whole scene, there was no subtitles.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, oh, okay. I thought that they were.
Yeah, it was just like a press conference. It's weird, though, that for some reason they're pretending that Shakespeare is a famous German writer. It's like, that's not the case, right? Or are they just like laying claim to his work and saying, oh, he's basically German because he has the heart of Germany in his writing? But
I also thought for sure that the last big performance of this movie
would be Mephisto, right?
Mephisto.
Yeah. We cut right from his summary of the importance of Hamlet as a play to the applause at the end of the show. The Prime Minister stands to applaud in his box, and Hendrik smiles and bows to the man. We cut to a large party emblazoned, as always, in as many swastikas and Nazi eagles as possible. In Hendrik's POV, we see everyone nodding and bowing to him. Among the partygoers is a director cameo with István Szabó complaining about the lavish party. All the party guests line up to applaud and throw flower petals in the air for the entrance of the Prime Minister and his date. Hendrik watches the man enter in almost slow motion, to the point that I expected something very dramatic to happen here, but he greets the Prime Minister calmly and kisses the hand of his date.
I mean, I'm assuming it's that they got married.
Yeah.
Is that what this is?
Well, I don't know if it's that or if it's an after party for the Hamlet performance, but I was almost sure that he was going to like pull out a gun and shoot the guy here. It's like he finally like came to his senses, but no, that's not what's going on.
What was that movie we watched with the wedding scene?
Oh my God.
Oh
yes.
my
That's
God.
exactly what I was thinking of, is Four Friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. He speaks glowingly to the crowd about the Prime Minister's various accomplishments and his history of proven loyalty to the ruling party. He credits the Prime Minister with the surviving and flourishing of the State Theater, which would surely have crumbled away without the party's emotional and financial support. Sometime later, the Prime Minister has already climbed back into his car to leave, but first summons Hendrik for a private conversation. They drive him to a large stadium, and the Prime Minister thinks this location is quite theatrical. It's where he would stage a play. He shares with Hendrik a dream that the Nazi Party might rule this nation for 1,000 years to come. He shouts Hendrik's name across the stadium to hear it echo back, and then orders Hendrik down to the field.
Hendrik! Höfgen!
On his way down the steps, Hendrik is hit with multicolored spotlights, and the background fades to almost black. The Prime Minister refers to the lights as the limelight that Hendrik has always craved. He squints and shields his eyes from the bright lights, and in a wider shot, we see him on the field being hit by 3 equidistant spotlights. He runs around the grass, blinded and lost. All we hear is a building stream of wind. Hendrik leans directly into camera to ask us what these people could possibly want from him, a mere actor, and the lights brighten until he's almost a silhouette of white, and we freeze frame for the credits to roll. The end.
During the credits rolling, when they're finally over, the wind continues.
Yeah.
Well into the black. Like it's like there's like another like 15 seconds of just wind blowing.
Yeah.
It's like, ugh, that's super ominous.
Yeah, it's interesting because the ending is sort of like a fake out like Sopranos type ending where you're like, I don't know if that means that he died right at the second that it freeze framed here. Like, is that the end of his story as a human? Because there's reasons they might have had him killed here. If they think that he's getting too big for his britches, he's bothering people about what happened to Otto and getting his friend back.
Right.
He's visiting the wife they told him to stop talking to. He went back to the girlfriend they told him to stop talking to. And maybe it's better off for everybody if they're just like, he died that night after his last performance, moving on. But yeah, it's a really fascinating story. I think the metaphor of him giving his soul to the Nazi Party is so incredibly fitting for someone whose actual claim to fame as a theatrical actor was this Mephisto character. It's really fascinating. And the fact that it plays off of these real historical events that actually happened to a real actor is incredible.
I mean, I hate to admit it, but it took me a really long time to realize that correlation between the two. Like, I was most of the way through the movie, I'm like, oh man, he had this Faustian mark. I'm like,
yeah.
But then like once it hit me, and I'm like, oh shit, that's so good.
Yeah. It's really incredible.
His Mephisto is the Prime Minister.
Right, yeah.
Who's like saying...
Who is also bald.
Yeah, and is also saying, Mephisto's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like we all identify with that character who tempts people into screwing over their beliefs and for greatness. Anyway, you want to be great?
I'd never seen this film. Actually, I had never heard of it. So, I've heard of the character, obviously.
I think I've seen the poster for it, and that's it.
Yeah, never. I never even seen the poster, and the poster is very reminiscent of a Fritz Lang poster.
Yeah.
But I as unusual of a film as it was, again, as far as like just kind of a narrative of like, just like I said about the scenes, it's just like we're moving so fast through time.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. It just incredibly well made. The only thing that bugged me was because we saw a German translation, and obviously like almost everybody in the cast was ADR'd.
Right, because they're mostly Hungarian actors.
Yeah.
And it's so strange to see lips moving it, and then hearing German. But when it's him speaking German, it's him speaking German.
Right. Yeah.
But everyone else is like no one. And it's one of those things where I feel like I'm watching an Italian film.
Sure. Yeah.
Where it's just like they don't.
It's like
record.
a giallo.
Yeah. They never
drama.
record. Yeah. That was it, and it wasn't like, it's not a big deal, but it just was just very noticeable to me.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm like, if we're gonna watch a dub, can it just be in English?
Yeah.
If it's not its original language.
I do still find it fascinating that Hungary beat Germany to doing the story of this actor character. And maybe 1980 was still too early for this to be something that Germany was comfortable producing themselves. But the fact that Hungary went for it and that it turned out so great and the performances are all great, I think the editing, like you said, is very creative and sort of a modern approach to editing you can tell information with these cuts that you wouldn't think can be communicated that way.
I think there's a lot of respect for the audience in the way this piece was crafted.
Yeah, they're not spoon feeding you anything.
They're not spoon feeding you anything. They're not dumbing it down. They're making strong, striking comparisons throughout the film, obviously, but it's up to you to figure this stuff out about this character.
Yeah. But I think it's really great, and I'm glad that it won the Academy Award for it too, in addition to having won the nomination slot.
But I wondered, how does that work with the Soviet Union? Wasn't Hungary on the other side? Wasn't Hungary part of the Soviet Union? Wouldn't it have been a Soviet film?
I think it was a nation on its own. But yeah, and I really like this lead actor playing the Hendrik character. I think he's fascinating because he's so hard to read so much of the time. But then by the time you finally feel like you get a handle on it, you're like, oh my God, he has completely changed from the person that we started with. That's crazy.
And he is one of those guys that you wouldn't think would be like flamboyant or emotional or like he has all these ranges of types of acting that he can do like as this character, but as the actor himself who is portraying these characters, like, you know, the layers there, I'm like, oh, this is so interesting to watch.
I love how giddy he is when he's officially running the theater himself, and he's like, I'm going to scream at these people, but you can tell that I'm doing it in a way that I'm so excited that I get to yell at these people. And then you know, he has all the important people walk through that he gives tours to, and he's like, I'm going to tell them all my great Mephisto jokes, and they're going to love it, and then I could just hide in my office and I don't have to talk to anybody for the rest of the day because I'm in charge.
Yeah, he also does like impersonations of a previous like director or director, like is like, and it's like, yeah, he's just having this montage of stories to tell.
But he's just like having the time of his life doing this, and it really lets you know explicitly this is not hard for him anymore. He's fully transitioned to this character, and this is what he loves doing now.
It's the makeup is so unique.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if this is some sort of just standard traditional Faust's kind of makeup that's done here.
It is what Grungens wore as the Mephisto character. There's a 1960 film starring Grungens in a very similar or identical makeup.
I just think it's just so striking. It's got this like kabuki look to it.
Sure, yeah.
That makes it it just puts you on edge when you see him in this. Especially I think when he goes up into the like the balcony seats with the general, and he's sitting there and he's so out of his element there, where he's like in the audience with this makeup on, and he's in such close quarters with the general that it feels very different than when he's on stage and he's powerful with this makeup on than when he's up there having this conversation with him.
I love the tension of every conversation he has with the prime minister, because every time you're like, is he about to break and turn back, like unveil himself as the guy he was at the start of the film? Or is he committing to this character? And every time you're more sure, no, he's fully gone. Like there's not a working class human behind this character anymore. It's literally just the mask now, which is what he told his girlfriend at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
And we're just coming to learn it by the end. Like, wow, you really have completely turned into this other person, and you are just a mask. There's not a person behind you.
I'm glad we got to see a nicely restored version, because even just his sweatiness that you get in this resolution, you're like, oh, that makes me feel nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely felt like a like when he's walking down the stairs, it felt very Caligula-esque.
For sure, yeah.
Like it's like, yeah,
pick him up and swing him by his head.
Yeah, this is where you're going to die.
Yep. But yeah, definitely big thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, thumbs up for sure.
I think I could probably pull at least a half an hour out of this that we don't need. It took a minute to get into it.
Yeah.
And then it was really good.
Richard, what do you think in Letterboxd?
So I have it at 15th.
Okay.
Which puts it below Death Trap and above Splits. Now, I know that
Above
Mephisto...
Splits.
I know.
Good.
Very similar culturally.
So here's the problem. After Mephisto, there's Mephisto. I keep saying Mephisto because that's
you're combining
Marvel.
it to manifesto.
There's a big gap. There's going to be a lot of things that go between those movies.
Yeah.
But as much as I enjoyed this movie, I think it'll be a while before I would revisit it. And the movies that are above it, I would revisit much sooner.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel bad. It's so close to Splits, but everything after it's such a drop off on my list after that.
Don't worry, it doesn't make you seem terribly perverted at all. That Splits would be right under Mephisto.
So I have it in third place.
Wow.
Because I just think it's really well done.
Yep.
Which is funny because it's right next to our other foreign film of the year. I have
Splits?
No, I have it below Das Boot.
Oh, that makes sense.
And above Death Trap.
Turns out Jesse just likes Nazis.
I'm big. You know what's really funny is like, as much as I always say I hate war movies, I always end up like ranking them really well.
That's funny.
Would you say that you Reich them?
It's in her third Reich.
Go home, both of you.
That's what she said. She Reich'd it third. I also have it pretty high up there. It's in sixth for me, which is just under Cannery Row and just above Swamp Thing. Before I start into the cast and crew section, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Michael Burgett of the Screen Nerds podcast. Mike is a friend of ours through the show Discord, and I enlisted his help putting together the credits for this episode because most of the cast's credits are all Hungarian films, and I don't know Hungarian film very well, and I knew it was going to take me a long time to sift through. There's a lot of people in the movie, so Michael helped me out there. Thank you, Michael. And if you're not already subbed to Screen Nerds podcast, you're missing out. The backlog is a great mix of retro movie reviews and brand new feature film releases. He stays on top of the newest stuff, sometimes to the point that I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that was already out, or how did you even see that? I don't think that is out. For example, in the last month, Screen Nerds has already covered 8 new releases, including Wild Robot, Joker 2, Saturday Night, Piece by Piece, and We Live in Time, to name a few. So if you like to see things opening weekend and need instant podcast reactions, Screen Nerds podcast is a great option for you. Our writer-director here was István Szabó. Soon after this film, he got jury prize at Cannes for 1984's Colonel Rettel. He also directs several English-language films, including 1991's Meeting Venus with Glenn Close, 1999's Sunshine with Ralph Fiennes, Rosemary Harris, and Rachel Weisz, not the other Sunshine from Danny Boyle.
Right.
2001's Taking Sides with Harvey Keitel and Stellan Skarsgård, and 2004's Being Julia with Annette Bening, who got an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress, Jeremy Irons, and Michael Gambon. He's credited for his cameo here as theater party attendant. The writer here was Péter Dobai. He also wrote Colonel Rettel for Szabó. The other writer was Klaus Mann, who wrote the novel. He also wrote novels adapted into Flucht in den Norden and Der Vulkan. The music here came from Zdenko Tomasi. He also did the music for Colonel Rettel. The cinematographer here was Lajos Koltai. He was also the cinematographer for 1989's Homer and Eddie with Whoopi Goldberg and Jim Belushi, 90s films Mobsters, Meeting Venus, Born Yesterday, When a Man Loves a Woman, Just Cause, Home for the Holidays, Mother, and Out to Sea, and in the 2000s, he lenses Taking Sides, The Emperor's Club, and Being Julia. He also directed the 2007 film Evening with Vanessa Redgrave, Toni Collette, and Claire Danes. The editor here was Zusha Sakani, who also cut Colonel Rettel. Klaus Maria Braunder played Hendrik Höfgen. In 1972, he was in The Salzburg Connection. Next season, he's Maximilian Largo in Never Say Never Again. He's Colonel Rettel in Colonel Rettel. He's also in Out of Africa, where he was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor and won a Golden Globe, and White Fang in 1991. In 2009, he shows up in Francis Ford Coppola's Tetro. Ildikó Bánsági played Nicoletta von Niebuhr. Later, she's in Pal Gabor's The Long Ride with John Savage. Krystyna Janda played Barbara Bruckner. She won Best Actress at the Cannes Film Festival in 1990 for the film Interrogation. Rolf Hoppe played General, or Prime Minister. He was also in the 1998 film Palmetto with Woody Harrelson, Gina Gershon, and Elizabeth Shue. Peter Andorai played Otto Ulrichs. He was also in 1999's Sunshine, and he played Thomas Edison in the 1989 film My 20th Century. Christine Harbort played Lottie Lindenthal. She was also in the 2001 film All the Queen's Men with Eddie Izzard and Matt LeBlanc. Ildikó Kishonti played Dora Martin, the prima donna. She was also in the film Lily in Love, made in 1984, released in the US in 85, with Christopher Plummer and Maggie Smith. Agnes Bonfalvi played Angelica Siebert. She was also in the 2001 An American Rhapsody with Natasha Kinski, Scarlett Johansson, Tony Goodwin, and Mae Whitman, and produced by Colleen Camp. In 2003, she was in the film Den of Lions with Stephen Dorff and Bob Hoskins. In 2006, Aragon, and an episode of the 2018 TV series The Alienist. She's also credited as Jaguar Woman in The Spy Who Dumped Me, written and directed by our friend Susanna Fogel. And most recently, Agnes Bonfalvi was in an episode of the 2021 Netflix series Shadow and Bone. Vilmos Kuhn played Ugiello. He was also in 99's Sunshine. István Komlos played Kiss Bach. He was also in 1991's Meeting Venus and 2004's Being Julia. Karoli Ujlaki played Sebastian. He was also Lieutenant Saviola in Colonel Rettel and a hotel receptionist in Meeting Venus. Kati Solyam played Miss Bernhardt. She was also in 99 Sunshine. Georgi Banfi played Faust. He played a judge in 8mm 2, which I'm glad wasn't subtitled Super 16. Josef Sor played Joachim. He was also in 1991's Meeting Venus. David Robinson, not that David Robinson, played Davidson. He was also in Wes Craven's 1991 film The People Under the Stairs. Giza Kovacs played Mueller. He was previously on the show for Scanners. He's back next season for The Dead Zone, and he's had TV appearances on the Friday the 13th series, the Highlander series, the 90s Goosebumps, the La Femme Nikita series, and more recently he was in 6 episodes of Orphan Black.
And look, we got a Vilmos and a Kovacs in this movie.
There you go. We got it all covered. Terry Tordai played Sculptor Laura. She was also in the 1988 film from Cannon Films called Hannah's War, starring Ellen Burstyn. Erin Bordon played Film Sinenso. She was in the 2010 film The Debt with Helen Mirren and Sam Worthington, and the 2015 film The Martian. She has TV roles on Law & Order SVU, FBI International, and more recently, Russian Doll.
There's a lot of Hungarian in Russian Doll because that's her heritage in that show.
Giza Laskovich played the President of France in Mata Hari, starring Sylvia Kristel. Lajos Mezi played von Falkenberg in that same Mata Hari film. Tomas Polipovits was also in Hannah's War with Terry Tordai. Frugina Pregitzer was also in Meeting Venus. Thomas Toth was also in 8mm 2 as a priest, and the 2009 film The Secret of Moonacre with Ioan Griffith, Tim Curry, and directed by Gabor Kasupo, the co-founder of animation studio Klasky Kasupo. Actually used to work next door to their original building on Fountain and Highland. We were the neighboring building. It used to be Simpsons, I think, for the first 3 seasons, but when I was interning at Tom Goes to the Mayor, we were next door to Klasky Kasupo. Janos Xantis was also in Lily in Love and the 1997 film The Gambler with Michael Gambon. Those are all the credits I have for this one. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, you can find all our socials at linktree/vintagevideopod. If you enjoy what we're doing, consider giving us a review on iTunes. I don't believe it helps visibility, but it's good for morale. And if you really like the show, maybe you should join our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/vintagevideopodcast for access to all our monthly 70s reviews and a hand in choosing next month's film. Patrons are currently choosing between Blood for Dracula, aka Andy Warhol's Dracula, Confessions of a Window Cleaner, Earthquake, The Klansman, Lenny, The Little Prince, Murder on the Orient Express, Phantom of the Paradise, The Street Fighter, and A Woman Under the Influence for a 50th anniversary review next month. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time when we'll be discussing I Ought to Be in Pictures, which IMDb describes like so. Brooklynite Libby Tucker leaves her mother in Brooklyn to visit her screenwriter dad Herbert Tucker in LA. She hasn't seen him for years and aspires to find a fast-paced life in movies. Along the way, Libby discovers who her dad is. We leave you now with a trailer for I Ought to Be in Pictures, which sounds eerily similar to Only When I Laugh.
Yeah.
But going to New York to be with her mother, and now she's coming to LA to be with her father, who is played by Walter Matthau, I think, in this film. And I'm pretty sure they're both Neil Simon. So, great. We leave you now with a trailer for I Ought to Be in Pictures.
Thanks.
From a kid like you, no better than to be out here on the road alone.
If I was with 12 boys, would you stop to pick me up?
She hitchhiked from Brooklyn.
I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I'm going to try to get into the movies.
To take Hollywood by storm. And her father by surprise.
Who are you?
Libby.
You the cleaning girl today?
No, just Libby. Libby Tucker. Libby Gladys Tucker. Blanche's girl.
After 16 years, she just walks in here. You know, I don't even know how she found me. Took him 20 years to find Eichmann.
You own this house?
Me? Are you kidding? 6 termites own it. They lease it to 4 mites, and I sublet it from them.
You're not in school then, I take it. I'm an actress. What do you do? Stage work mostly? No, mostly I audition.
You're really serious about this, aren't you?
Why not?
You like disappointment? You like rejection?
I wanted to be tall, I'm not. I wanted to be rich, I'm not. I wanted to be gorgeous, I'm not. When you start off your life like that, what could they do to disappoint you?
Leaving cards and windshields is not how you become an actress.
Going to Hollywood Park Racetrack is not how you get a script written.
You must be pretty strong, come all the way from New York with a 200-pound chip on your shoulder.
Well, you ought to know. You're the one who dumped it there.
You're a dreamer. That's what you are. You paint Morocco on your ceiling and pretend that you don't live in Brooklyn. You pretend your father is the king of Hollywood. You're going to march out here and become the princess. Well, life is not pretending.
10 after 2. Where could she be on a night like this? Don't you think it's kind of late?
Welcome to the world of worried parents. You want the God's honest truth? I don't even want to be an actress. I just wanted to come out here and see you. I just wanted to know what you were like.
You look different than the first day you got here. Taller. Did you get taller?
Yeah, inside.
Neil Simons. I ought to be in pictures.
I also got gorgeous, but it didn't come out yet.